This video is filmed in Vermont, which is unceded Abenaki territory, also known as Nadakana. We at Spoonful Herbals seek to honor and acknowledge the cultural and physical violence that happened here, as well as to uplift the knowledge of our Indigenous medicine keeper colleagues. This is Katherine Elmer with Spoonful Herbals and Ralliard Apothecary, and I wanted to share a little bit about some of the backyard edibles that are available to us in the spring season. I'm here in Vermont in May, and some of the plants that I love to go out and forage for this time of year are dandelion greens, chickweed. I also love to get some violet leaf, and all of those are really delicious but super nutritious green plants that are available even before the other greens such as spinach or arugula or mesclun are coming up or available from our local farms. So I'm going to introduce you to some of those, how to harvest them, and make some recipe suggestions for you so you can improve your nutrition this spring. So this common backyard plant is chickweed. This is more likely to be found as a weed in garden beds and in disturbed areas. The Latin is Stellaria media, which speaks to the star shape of this tiny white flower. And chickweed is another one of our delicious spring edibles, and my 9-year-old son actually likes this plant because it tastes a little bit like fresh sweet corn. So I recommend just putting, a handful. You can chop it up a little bit on your salad, but it's very succulent and gentle, has a gentle flavor. And not only is this an excellent plant for providing nutrition in the springtime, it's also known for helping to soothe irritated skin and skin conditions, and it can be taken as a tea or eaten as a wild edible, or it can be partially dried and steeped in olive oil to make a chickweed infused oil and included in salves to help soothe itchy or irritated skin. So one of my favorite spring plants, which has a relatively short harvest season, is violet. This is spring violet, Viola tricolor. It has this characteristic heart-shaped leaf, and this is a really mild tasting green. It's also considered a little bit moistening. If you chew on the leaf, it has a moistening mucilaginous quality. Violet leaf is not only a really great plant to add in fresh in salads, but you can prepare it, you can dry it and add it to tea blends. You can also partially dry it and infuse it in olive oil, and it makes a really wonderful rub for lymphatic circulation. Particularly, it's a traditional remedy for breast circulation. And the flowers are also edible, and you can prepare them to make a really bright purple, beautiful syrup, which I love to include in spring fairy tea parties. The other properties of violet that actually come through more in its relative, I know this is Johnny Jump Up, and if you nibble on a Johnny Jump Up flower, it has a wintergreen flavor, and that wintergreen flavor actually comes from a compound called methyl salicylate, which is the precursor to aspirin or salicylic acid, and that compound is effective as an anti-inflammatory, but it tends to take a while for it to be metabolized. So not the best remedy for a quick fix from headache pain, but a really beautiful edible flower that can be added to salads in the springtime. Most folks are familiar with dandelion. Its name actually comes from these characteristic toothing on the leaves, which kind of look like lion's teeth, or dent de lion in French, dandelion. Another name which speaks to its medicinal properties in French is pissenlit, which means piss the bed. So one thing to know about dandelion greens is you don't want to be too enthusiastic because it is a diuretic and might make you pee a lot. Dandelion is a really nutritious and delicious spring green. It's best to harvest the greens before they flower because they tend to be less bitter, but the bitter properties also help support digestion and detoxification in the springtime. But I like to just include a few leaves in a salad or even chopped up finely in a soup or other dishes. It's also a really nice addition to wild weeds pesto, and we'll make that recipe available for you on our website and in our newsletter if you'd like to make that for your family. A really common medicinal that you can find in your yard blooming this time of year in early spring is ground ivy. This has many common names. My favorite actually is gill over the ground, but it's also called creeping Charlie, henbit, alehoff. It's also known as painter's wort, and it actually is a pretty effective remedy for helping to remove heavy metals from the blood, such as lead. So I always thought that was what that name was associated with. And this is a really beautiful, low-growing, crawling mint family plant. It has these delicate purple flowers in that traditional shape of a mint. And it also, if you look at it closely, it has a square stem, which is a characteristic of the mint family. And the smell of this plant reminds me of mowed lawns in the summer. And because it has such a strong, relatively pungent odor, it's never something that I use a lot of, but it is edible and it can be really nice, just a little bit of sprinkling in a spring salad, especially because of those detoxifying properties in the springtime. It could also be added to a wild wheats pesto. And the other use for this is as lung antimicrobial, also to help clear congestion from the lungs. And that could be used in tea form, but also prepared as a steam, so breathing the steam from the tea into your lungs. And just something that's widely abundant in backyards this time of year. Things to keep in mind when harvesting wild edibles from your backyard, especially if you live in an urban area, is you want to make sure that the soil is clean. So part of that is understanding the land use history or perhaps the current practices on the land. You don't want to be harvesting wild edibles from any areas that pesticides have been applied, such as pesticides to kill dandelion. You also want to be aware of harvesting wild edibles from near houses that are older than 1980, houses that might have had lead-based paint in them. And just knowing the history of the land, if there's been any auto dealerships or gasoline that might be on the ground, which would also contain lead. And other considerations is never to harvest wild edibles or medicinal plants close to roadsides. Usually it's a 25-foot buffer from the roadside if it's a relatively busy road. If it's a highway, I would say 50 to 100 feet from those busy roads, just to make sure that you're not consuming any chemicals that may be harmful to your body.